Good afternoon. I'm Tiffany DeZerman. I'm with the Rochester Avon Historical Society. And today I have the pleasure of introducing Bob Milne. Bob is considered to be the best ragtime boogie-woogie pianist in the world. In 2004, Bob visited the Library of Congress, where he performed a concert and gave several oral history interviews in which he was declared a national treasure. He is an active musical ambassador for the United States Department of State and has performed numerous times in Japan, as well as for members of the Swiss Parliament at the U.S. Embassy in Bern, and for functions attended by heads of state, senators, and members of Congress, with command performances for the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Washington, D.C. Bob graduated from Rochester High School, where he played French horn in the band. He then attended the prestigious Eastman School of Music at the age of 17 and became assistant first horn in the Rochester Philharmonic at the age of 19. After playing symphony concerts, the students would hang out in local places. And when the piano player didn't show at a sing-along saloon one night, Bob filled in. They hired him on the spot. He continued playing the horn until age 21, but soon became a full-time piano player in the Detroit area and playing 7 nights a week for 25 years. Bob quickly became a dedicated student and presenter of ragtime, a unique American form of music. He has acquired both a vast repertoire of tunes and an extensive knowledge of the history of ragtime music. Bob has performed in concert halls worldwide since 1991. He teaches music history at universities around the country and is the founder and director of the Frankenmuth Ragtime Festival in Michigan. He has appeared at numerous music festivals, including the Scott Joplin Ragtime Festival in Missouri, the Montreal Jazz Festival, and the Sacramento Ragtime Festival. Bob has been averaging somewhere around 250 performances per year. He is highly sought after for both his incredible piano playing and easygoing presentations. Please give a warm welcome to Rochester's own Bob Milne.
Hello. Hello. Oh, I have a microphone. It sounds like it's on. I'm amazed to hear her read all of that. I'm just a guy named Bob who's been trying to make a living playing a piano for, I don't know, 50 years. No, I just graduated from high school. We were there. And I hope he didn't get confused. I have 2 Rochesters in my background. I grew up here. Then I went to the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. So, well, anyways, let's see. Let me get this thing out of the way. Can you hear me without it? Yes. It's easy. Ragtime was a style of music that included Dixieland, a lot of folk music, and Louis Armstrong, late in his career, he actually said that words like boogie woogie and blues, jazz, he says, we never heard of those words. All that stuff was called ragtime. So anyways, here's a tune that Louis used to play a lot called the Canal Street Blues.
time. It was an old expression from the 1890s. He plays in ragged time. And what that meant was the official word means it's a syncopated style, syncopation. But this was created by folk musicians. If you listen to most music, you'll notice that the melodies will land on the beat. The beat is 1, 2, 3, 4. You can hear it in the left hand. So a melody like Stars and Stripes will notice the melodies land on top of the beats. And Stephen Foster. The melody notes land at the same time as the bass notes, the beat. Well, the folk musicians of America who didn't read music, didn't study music, they just played it from learning it in barn dances. They developed this style where their melodies were landing in between the beats. So you would hear the melody like this, the melodies. You can hear the melody note hit before the left hand. Like that. So that style became known as ragged time, which turned into ragtime. So you can hear it in all of this stuff. The blues. That was right, what she was reading about me. I was a French horn player. And I ended up in the Rochester, New York Philharmonic when I was 19. Then the Baltimore Symphony, and I actually quit the symphonies because when I was 21 I learned what politics are like inside of a big symphony orchestra. And it was no longer fun anymore. I just lost interest overnight. So my cousins came down to rescue me in Baltimore as I was hanging out in the pool halls. And they brought me back to Detroit and decided to try and cheer me up, so they took me to a place in Detroit called the Dakota Inn Rathskeller. No one's ever heard of that, I see. Not at all. And the piano player took a break, and my cousins literally threw me onto the piano stand. And they hired me that night, which was effectively the end of my career. So then I became a piano player, playing German songs. I played different songs. I was playing in there 6 and 7 hours a night, and then other places around town. But the Rathskeller had an old player piano in it, the kind that you put rolls in, but they had these big long rolls and they'd play for 20 minutes. And I was just learning how to play the piano because I'm self-taught. So I was listening to the player piano and I said, how can it do that? Who can play like that? I didn't realize yet that 3 guys were playing on that roll. So I was trying to imitate the thing. Yeah, it took about a year before someone pointed that out to me. So here is one of those player piano rolls. This is called, what is the name of this? Do You Ever Think of Me, 1920. And I keep pointing out lately that all of this was so much easier before that global warming stuff started. Let's see. Well, Scott Joplin is the most famous name left over from the ragtime era. was a couple of the numbers that were used in the sting. The second one, of course, called the Entertainer. And the first one was called the Easy Winners. Now, most people don't realize that Scott Joplin's nickname was the Entertainer. That's where the name of that came from. We actually found it on his business cards printed in the 1890s. He wrote that in 1902. But his business cards actually say, Master Scott Joplin, the Entertainer. So, now let's pretend you're the Deep South. You've wandered down some little trail out into the woods and starting to go out into the swamps and the bayous. You're starting to see some old shacks sitting around. You're approaching an old shack over there. Let me get this thing out here. And someone comes up to you and they says, well, how are y'all? You say, well, okay, I guess. That guy says, mighty fine to see you out here. Where you come from, stranger? They ask you a few questions. After a few minutes, you notice there's some other guys standing around out in the woods. You didn't see them at first. You've wandered into a still. Over there you can see a little bigger shack. You walk in with this guy once they decide that you're okay. There's a guy over there playing the piano. You notice that there isn't a bar. What they've got is a couple of barrels standing up on end and some boards across it. That's the bar. It's what they call the barrel houses. You may have heard of the expression, the barrel house piano player. That's where it came from. Then it's kind of quiet because you're there about 2 in the afternoon. There's a few characters sitting around. You see these mason jars sitting on tops of barrels and tables, and looks like they got water in them all. It's not water. It's white lightning, of course. Then somebody tells you, that piano player over there is pretty good, you know. We got 2 piano players in this joint. You say, well, what time's the next one coming in? He says, well, this guy just started 2 hours ago at noon. He plays till midnight. Then the other one starts and he plays till noon. This is all true American music history. You say to that guy, well, is he playing the blues? And he'll say to you, I don't know, he's just playing the piano. You say, what's that little sign on the wall over there? You say, oh, that sign's about the piano player. Well, what's it say? It says, don't shoot him. That that was actually the rule in all of the barrel houses in this, everywhere in the country. It was the one and only rule in those places. Can't shoot the piano there. So the guy, some woman and a guy, they wanted to sort of dance. Right there is the first 4 minutes of your 12-hour gig. These places were bizarre, and I mean, they were the worst elements of society is what you would find in these joints. People who couldn't show their face in town because of the wanted posters. You know, Bonnie and Clyde and things like that. People who busted off at chain gangs. You name it. That's why they had that rule. You can't shoot a piano player because those people would. And it did, I suppose, which is why they had the rule. So, okay. Let's go back to 1899. Tell you a true little story here. There's a guy in New York City whose name is Harry von Tilzer. He was a small music publisher. He had an office office on 28th Street. Does anybody know what 28th Street was called in those days? It was called Tin Pan Alley. Because of all the out-of-tune pianos that were playing away up and down the 2-block area. Well, Harry Von Tilzer was sitting in his little office there one day, and in comes a friend of his, a guy named Albert Lamb. Albert says to him, "Harry, my friend, I have a tale of woe that I can depart unto you. Maybe you can even write music to it, like all those tear-jerking things that you do." So Harry said, "Tell me about it." The guy says, "I have visited a den of iniquity." Harry says, "Tell me more." And he says it was a few years ago, 10 years ago, 12, I don't remember, but it was down in Tombstone, Arizona. When I was there, in the early 1880s. And they had a saloon called the Birdcage Saloon, so I wandered into that place, not knowing where I was going. They had a bar in the front of it, of course. There were cowboys in there, shooting their guns off and drinking. Now this is all true. Me and Linda have been to this place. You can still see the bullet holes. So I got myself a beer, he said. I walked into the spacious back room where there were a bunch of card tables. And there were cowboys drinking whiskey, smoking their cigars, and gambling. There was one who they feared more than others. They called him Doc Holiday. Thru. And way down there at the far end of the room, there was an old piano. Someone was playing it. And as he played, the lady walked out onto the stage. The piano player slowed down. She began to sing a song. And he played. And she sang. And she sang. And the cowboys put down their cards. Put down their whiskey, and they all turned and they looked at her, and they looked while she sang. Harry, do I have to tell you what kind of place this was? I think you know. The lady was a fallen angel, singing to attract attention to herself. Train coming home, I wrote a poem about the Birdcage Saloon. I give it to you now. Maybe you can make up music what I've written here. So Harry Von Chilzer back there in 1899 on Tin Pan Alley, he put this little poem up in his old tinny piano. And he said that the words actually told him what the melody was. She's only a bird in a gilded cage, a beautiful sight to see. Now you may think that she's happy and free from care. She's not, though she seems to be. Oh, it's sad when you think of her wasted life. Her beauty will dim with age, for she sold her soul for an old man's gold. She's a bird in a gilded cage. Oh, it's sad when you think of her wasted life. Her beauty will dim with age, for she sold her soul for an old man's gold. She's a bird in a gilded cage, just a bird in a gilded cage. Thank you very much.
And that is how one of the most famous songs in the world came to be written. That song was more popular than anything you can imagine right up until into the 1950s. And I've forgotten how many millions of copies it sold. But yeah, it was based on the place where Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp hung out. Oh, Linda and I, we visited this place some years ago. I'd heard of the Birdcage Saloon. Oh, Birdcage. In Old English slang, a bird is a foxy lady, so that's where the name came from. So the Birdcage Saloon is still there. It's on the National Monument Register. And so Linda and I went there, and they gave us a 2-hour tour of the place. And there was no one there. They just decided because I played piano or my interest in it or something, so we got this incredible tour. There was the table that Doc Holliday dealt cards from, and there was the old, it was actually a flat upright piano, you know, the old square grand pianos down there, and there was the stage. And the place went out of business, I think, in 1886, something like that. And basically the same dust is still there. Because they want to preserve it the way it is. They do dust it every now and then. There's a big horseshoe balcony around at the top of this room. There are the bullet holes in the ceilings. They fixed them on the top, of course, but you can still see them. There's a hole like that in the bar with a hole in the middle. Somebody shot the bar with a .45. So it's just a bizarre experience. But anyways, so we're in there, and finally we're leaving, and somebody said, well, are you going to stay for the reenactment? So I thought, what are they going to do, reenact this person on the stage? And he says, no, right down the street is the OK Corral. Okay. So we went down there. And the OK Corral was just a horse corral for the town in those days. You could rent a horse or leave yours there, that kind of thing. And today it's a monument. They've got it fenced off. And the actual place where the gunfight took place is in one area, but we were in over there. And they had bleachers. And they had a little bit of a fake town built around there so that you can see what actually happened. And so they put on a program that was 35 minutes long. And then these guys were out there talking about how they didn't like Wyatt Earp. They didn't like Virgil Earp, his brother, who was the sheriff or something. They didn't like Morgan Earp, who had come down there to help enforce the law, and they sure didn't like that Doc Holliday character. And Doc was staying in an apartment that he'd rented where its window was right on the edge of the OK Corral. So this was the Clanton gang that was out there, waiting for Holliday to come home. They were going to blast him through the window. So at any rate, for 34 minutes, the Clanton gang is standing around talking about how much they don't like these guys, and for whatever reasons. We're all sitting in the bleachers. And at the end of 34 minutes, 4 guys walk in wearing the long black coats and the brim hats. They did everything very authentic. And they said, "Put down your guns. We don't allow guns in this town." So there's some verbiage back and forth that was rather direct. And all of a sudden, it was so fast you could barely see it, but then Doc Holliday is standing out there also with a smoking double-barrel shotgun. People are lying on the ground, guns are coming out, bam, 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 bam. And then everyone who we've been listening to for 34 minutes is lying on the ground dead. Except one guy, Ike Clanton, was crawling towards Wyatt Earp saying, "Don't shoot me, I'm unarmed." And at that point, Wyatt is standing there with a smoking gun. He looks up at us, up in the bleachers. He says, "It's over. Get out of here." We did, of course. But this is Tombstone, Arizona, and it is still very much there. And OK Corral is at one end of Main Street, and the saloon, Birdcage, is at the other. And we would have never really known the story of this thing unless we'd gone to the Birdcage. So if you're going traveling and if you're going to Arizona, go and see this thing because it's amazing. The actors have studied everything possible to be found about what happened in the corral. And they reenact it with the utmost of accuracy to their knowledge. So, okay, enough of that. But that's The Bird in the Gilded Cage was written about that place. And of course, the saloon has got a framed picture of that music from 1899 right in there. Oh, let's see. What else do we have here? Oh, did I tell you? And see, during my playing days in Detroit, I played in the German Rathskeller. I learned ragtime in there. I played in all kinds of places around town, including the Oak Gardens. Which had this band in there that came from Tennessee. Once a But at any rate, I had a lot of my background was playing in what they called hillbilly bars in those days. So my friends in the Rathskeller said, well, Bob, don't call them hillbillies. They don't like it. It's called country western now. So I said, oh, okay. So the next time I went back to the Oak Garden, see, I was like 22, 23, and I'm playing with all these guys, 45 or whatever, or 50 years old, and I'm just new at this. So I'm trying to keep my mouth shut, but this one night I said something on the bandstand. I said something, and I mentioned country western music. This guy turns around, looks at me, and says, hey, kid. He says, we're not country western in here, we're hillbillies, and don't you forget it. Okay, all right, okay. Now I know. There's actually a difference, but I won't go into that right now. But they were very proud of their name. They didn't like anything else. So I've always had this affinity for that kind of music. A couple of years ago, I write all kinds of music, but I just sort of make it up in my head. And me and Linda, we were on some 700-mile drive between here and Florida because of the schedule I was on. And so it was somewhere down around just north of the Florida border. I heard this song going on in my head, so I listened to it, and I said, oh, Linda, what's this? I sung it to her a little. She says, I don't know. So I keep driving. A little while later, I said, well, here's another part of it. She says she doesn't know. So finally she says, well, if you don't know what it is, and if I don't know what it is, maybe you just made it up. I said, well, maybe I did. I don't know. So the song had something to do with Tennessee. And shortly after this happened, I played this at the University of the South in southern Tennessee. And the chancellor said, oh my goodness. And he says, you're coming back here next year, which was a year ago, last February. So they dragged me and Linda and some friends of mine, musicians, and they got a bunch of musicians out of Nashville, and we all put on a 2-hour performance. And they ended this performance with my little song. I said, oh my goodness. So I said, well, who's going to sing it? This is something Dolly Parton ought to sing. She doesn't live far from here. They said, well, she's not here tonight, so you're going to have to sing it.
Send me a blossom from the glen. Send me a lily now and then. Never let me wander where your name's not known. So send me some flowers from my home. I still hear that mountain fiddle on the porch in the night. It plays a sweet melody. In the splendor of the evening comes a symphony of light. When that summer moon comes rising through the trees. Rock my cradle from afar. I'll always know who you were. when my days on earth shall end, leave me by the river bend, with the gentle tulip poplins watching over me, 'cause I never left you, Tennessee.
I don't understand how I came up with that song because I've never lived in Tennessee a day in my life. I'm from Rochester, Michigan. Hattie Fox Lane, North Liberty Road, just before Dutton. I used to slide down Dutton Hill when it was coming, those sheets of ice we used to get every New Year's. I went down Dutton Hill with a character named Chris Letts on a toboggan, and we couldn't control the thing whatsoever. I actually fell off of it, and I was sliding at the same speed as it was. I was right next to it. Well, see, I don't want to just keep everyone hanging around too long. Let me play one more tune here. This is kind of a colorful tune with a little bit of a story to it. I like tunes that have stories. The most powerful boogie in the world is a thing called the honky-tonk train blues. If it's a boogie, why is it called a blues? Well, this came out of Chicago in 1922, and they hadn't invented the phrase boogie-woogie yet. That didn't happen until 27. So they used to call these fast-driving things fast Texas blues, things like that. Honky-tonk train blues, well, it's been recorded multiple times, of course, since 22. And the recording I'm thinking of was made in 1983 by a very good piano player whose name is Clint Eastwood. Yeah, most people don't know that Clint was a tremendous piano player. In '83, he made a movie called The Honky Tonk Man, and he plays the role of a saloon piano player. And in that movie, you can see him and hear him playing this thing. When the movie came out back in the 80s, I was sitting there watching it with my friends, and my friends were all saying, well, he's not really playing the piano, he's faking it. Well, the camera was right there, and he had his back to the camera, and I could see the keyboard. I said, well, he's doing a good job if he's faking it, because the notes that are coming out of that movie are the same notes that he's pushing down on the piano. So at any rate, a few years ago, I was out in California at this resort that's up in the North Redwoods. It's a huge area, 3,000 acres of redwoods. I'm walking down a trail, and here comes Clint Eastwood from the other direction. So I said, well, of course, I recognize you, and I started talking pianos. So there was a bench there, so we sat down and talked pianos. And he's extremely soft-spoken and nice. He's not like these characters in movies. And so we're talking pianos for a while, and then I said to him, hey, Clint, I said, I think you actually played the honky-tonk train on that piano. He says, yeah, he did. And he said it bothered him that people accused him of faking it, because he said he had to work very hard to be able to play it again, because he hadn't played piano much for years. So finally he had to go one way and I was going the other. So I said, Clint, before you leave, I got a little story I want to tell you. The only witness to this story is Linda, who's sitting over there. Otherwise, no one would believe this. I said, Clint, he lives about 300 miles south of where we were sitting at that moment. He lives down there in the Big Sur area. So I said, out there in the Big Sur Redwoods, I said, there's an old lodge. It's called the River Inn. He says, oh, yeah. He says, I love that place. And he's telling me there's an old piano in it, and then him and his buddies, they go in there and play the thing. I said, yeah, I know. I said, the reason I know is me and Linda stopped there, a few years ago. And I said, I said, I played the piano in there, and then the woman that owned it, she told me that you, Mr. Clint, come there. So I asked that woman if I could leave one of my cards. And she said, yeah. So Clint said to me, he says, well, Bob, she never gave me a card from anyone all the times I've ever gone there. And I said, no, she didn't. He said, because I wrote you a note, then I got in my car outside, and then I chickened out. I got up and I went all the way back inside, and I picked up the card and took it away. So he says, he asked me why I did that. And I said, well, Clint, see, I had never met him and never dreamed that I would. So when I wrote this card, I said, well, Clint, I said, when she told me that you played this piano here, I pulled out one of my cards and I wrote on the back of it, it said, hey, Clint. Whoops. We got a phone going off here. I think she'll quiet that down in a minute. By the way, ragtime came from many years before the invention of cell phones. Did I happen to mention that? There you go, you got it, thanks. So he asked me why I didn't leave the card, and I said, well, Clint. And I said, she told me you played this piano, so I pulled out one of my cards and I wrote on the back of it, hey, Clint, new piano in town, says you can't play. Come on down, make my day. Well, I was scared to leave it. So he asked me, so he just broke up laughing, thanks goodness, you know. And see, the reason I didn't leave it was I didn't want him to get a card from some yahoo, and I didn't know how he'd react to it. So, but he asked me why I didn't leave it, and I said, well, I was afraid I'd be home where I live in Michigan, and it would be a dark and stormy night. I said that. And I said, and I'd hear knocking on my door. And I'd go over and open the door. Did you guys see that movie he made called Unforgiven? That dreadful hired murderer that he played, and his name was William Money. For you who didn't see it, it's an 1890s thing. So I told him I was afraid that I'd open my door and see William Money standing in front of me with his guns and his brim hat and the water coming. I said, and I would have just had a heart attack, and that would have been it. So at any rate, you know, he got a kick out of it. And I've seen him a few times since, and at the resort, and we laugh about it. But anyway, enough of that. And so here's a honky-tonk train blues. And I also want to add that, you know, I'm from Rochester, and like I said at the beginning, I'm just some guy that plays a piano and tries to make a living. It's such an honor for me to come here and play for this wonderful occasion. Pat, thank you for asking me. And all of you for coming out here. So thank you again. Here's a honky-tonk train blues. Let's get this out of here.